My son told me to find my own place after 50 years, so I sold the house and moved to Monaco. After decades of dedicating my life to my family, I was surprised by a heartbreaking phrase. You should consider something more appropriate for your age. Said by my own son, that phrase made me realize that, in their eyes, I had ceased to be essential. I felt small, displaced, as if there was no longer any room for me in the house I helped build. But amidst the pain and silence, something inside me awakened. I discovered it was still time to start over. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to honor everything I once was and could still be. Today, at 68 years old, I live a reality I never imagined. It wasn't easy, but it was transformative. I'm immensely happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from. I really want to know how far my story is reaching. The smell of coffee seemed distant, as if it had been prepared for someone else. I sat at the table with my hands clasped, trying to hide the slight tremor. Nathan was reading something on his phone, indifferent to my silence, while Rachel meticulously adjusted her cutlery. The bread in front of me hardened, and I wondered when my home had become just a waiting room. Still, I smiled, hoping for some gesture of affection. Rachel looked up and smiled reservedly, like someone delivering news she believes to be a gift. Eleanor, have you ever thought about a more appropriate place for your age? She asked, her voice sweet but cold. I felt a chill run up my spine, but I took a deep breath not to show it. At that moment, I realized my presence was no longer as welcome as before. My stomach tightened and the coffee went down bitter. The room fell silent. I searched the walls for memories of laughter and voices that once echoed there. I remembered Peter, sitting at the head of the table, and how he made Nathan laugh until he cried. Now everything was contained, calculated, distant. My heart pounded in a strange rhythm, as if it were being pushed out of my own chest. The stale bread before me was just a symbol of that. I wanted to answer, but my voice died in my throat. The fear of conflict prevented me from speaking. I just nodded, pretending to reflect on what Rachel was saying, while inside something was falling apart. I felt a sudden warmth in my eyes and lowered my head so they wouldn't notice. The woman who had welcomed Rachel as a daughter was now just an inconvenience to be removed. You deserve a place that's more assisted, Mother. Nathan put down his phone and looked at me in a way I didn't recognize. She's right, Mom. It's for the best, he said, trying to sound affectionate, but with a tone that felt more like an order. The room spun for an instant, and I had to hold onto the arm of the chair to keep my balance. The weight of his words crushed a part of me I thought was indestructible. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. Of course, my son, I understand, I said, hearing my own voice like a distant echo. Inside, every letter was a splinter. The man who once held my hand to cross the street was now pushing me away, as if I were a burden. I wanted to scream that I was still there, whole, but I held back. Silence seemed more dignified. Rachel, satisfied, stirred her cup like someone stirring a fate already decided. I watched her impeccable nails reflect the light, remembering how admirable she seemed to me at first. Now I saw a wall in her. A wall between me and my own son. Every gesture of hers made me feel smaller, until I became invisible. The urge to cry grew, but I knew crying would give them reason. I swallowed hard, raising my eyes to Nathan as if asking for help, but only found haste. I felt something inside me begin to break, silently, without witnesses. It was like watching a fire from behind a glass wall. By the end of the month, everything resolved, okay? After coffee, I went out into the garden as if seeking air after a deep dive. The cold wind touched my face, reminding me that I was still alive, even if everything inside seemed dead. The flowers I planted with Peter still resisted, despite the neglect. Every petal was a reminder that something beautiful could persist amidst indifference. Sharon appeared by the fence as she always did, bringing the comfort of a friendly face. "Are you all right, Ellie?" she asked, her sweet tone breaking through my defenses. I tried to smile, but the smile was crooked. I walked to her with slow steps, feeling tears welling up without permission. "They want to send me away, Sharon," I whispered and finally cried. She rested her hand on the fence, leaning a little closer. "You're not a burden," she said firmly, looking me in the eyes. But I felt exactly like that, a weight no one wanted to carry. My heart throbbed painfully, and each beat seemed to repeat Nathan and Rachel's words. I wanted to disappear, but not this way. Leaning against that fence was like holding onto a last anchor. Sharon talked about alternatives, about my right to choose. But at that moment I just needed to cry just to exist. The wind swayed my hair and for an instant I felt Peter was there, watching me in silence. If I'm a burden, at least I'll choose where to leave it. Days later, I tried to gather strength to talk to Nathan about small renovations. I wanted to paint the walls, change curtains, maybe renovate the garden. It was my way of fighting to stay there, to show that there was still life in me. But before I finished the sentence, he interrupted. Legally, the house is mine, remember? The words were like an unexpected slap. My chest burned and I felt a lump in my throat. I had always considered that house a home built with two hands, mine and Peter's. Every brick seemed to hold our stories. Every piece of furniture had the mark of our choices. Now, however, I was just a tolerated visitor. I was just suggesting, I murmured, but Nathan was already looking away, too busy with something else. His haste to silence me revealed how fragile my place there was. A chill ran down my spine, and I realized that not even the roof over my head belonged to me anymore. I sat in the armchair, feeling the walls press in on me. The house that once welcomed me now seemed to shrink, expelling me inch by inch. My eyes scanned the old photos on the shelf, and I wondered where, after all, I had lost myself along the way. I'm just trying to help you adapt, Mom. That night, I went to the office and opened the drawer where I kept old documents. The smell of aged paper brought back memories of Peter, his patient smile and his firm hands dealing with bureaucracy. Among receipts and certificates, I found letters he had written to me, small proofs that I had been loved, valued. Every paper I touched was a reminder of who I was, and all that I had helped build. I felt the pain of loss mingle with indignation. How could Nathan use that house as a weapon against me, knowing what it represented? Peter's memory became an even heavier burden that night. I sat on the floor with the letters open around me, like a quilt of memories. I wanted to talk to him, ask for advice, hear his voice saying I wasn't alone. But only silence answered me, a silence that screamed louder than any words. I closed my eyes and imagined what he would say seeing our family like this. The image of him looking at me with disappointment cut my heart. I hugged myself, trying to hold back tears, but they came anyway, washing my face with a mixture of grief and anger. If he knew about this, he'd be ashamed of you. The next day I found Sharon in the garden again. She noticed my tired expression before I even spoke. You cried all night, didn't you? She asked, and I just nodded. She approached, bringing with her that human warmth I lacked at home. I told her everything. The documents, Peter's memories, Nathan's words. As I spoke, she listened with a patience that made me feel alive again. Sharon then asked a question that echoed within me. What if you sold everything and started over? The idea seemed crazy at first. But as she spoke, I began to see a glimmer of freedom through the invisible bars that surrounded me. To sell, to start over, to choose. It wasn't just an escape, it was an act of reclaiming. For the first time in a long time, my heart beat with hope. I looked at the house, at the garden, at the flowers that resisted like me. I felt something change within me, something small but firm. It was no longer just sadness, it was also a desire for life. What if I just disappeared from here, Sharon? I spent the morning with the phone in my hand, hesitating before dialing. Derek Liu's name had been in my address book since Peter's time. He had always been a discreet, serious man, someone my husband trusted without reservation. I felt a mixture of fear and hope as I remembered his calm voice. I needed answers, and I could no longer wait for them to come from Nathan. I looked out the window as the phone rang. The garden flowers seemed to watch me, like silent witnesses to a decision I didn't yet fully understand. When Derek answered, his voice brought back an old memory. Dinners in the living room with Peter talking about investments, dreams, the future. That future that now seemed to crumble in my hands. It's me, Eleanor Porter, Peter's widow, I said with a thin voice, feeling the words pierce me. I slowly explained the situation with Nathan, the pressure to move, and the fear of having nothing. He listened without interrupting, like a safe harbor in the storm. Every second of his silence seemed like a judgment to me, but it was just attention. When I finished, I took a deep breath, like someone diving and emerging from an icy ocean. Derek, I began, my throat tight. I need to know what I have before they decide for me. The sentence came out firmer than I expected. And for the first time in a long time, I felt control over something. Can you come here? I need to understand what I have. 2 days later, Derek arrived. Elegant and punctual, he opened his briefcase with almost surgical precision. I watched him spread papers and graphs on the table where I had so often served Peter tea. It was like opening a safe, but not of money, of truths. With each document, each figure, I felt less invisible. He explained that, besides the house, Peter had left robust investments that continued to yield. I listened to him like someone listening to a new language, trying to believe what the figures said. It was more than I imagined, more than Nathan seemed to know. Suddenly, the feeling of powerlessness gave way to something different, power. Derek looked up and smiled slightly. You have freedom, Ellie, he said, with a calm that made my hands tremble. It was as if he was opening a door I thought was locked forever. Freedom wasn't just a number in the account. It was a new path unfolding before me. As he detailed projections and possibilities, I felt myself reborn. It was as if Peter from somewhere was telling me to get up. For the first time, I glimpsed the chance to decide my destiny without asking permission. You can live wherever you want, without touching the principal. That night, I opened the computer with a mixture of curiosity and fear. I typed properties abroad, without knowing exactly what I was looking for. Images of distant cities opened before me. Lights, streets, unknown seas. Every click was a small escape. My heart raced, as if I were betraying something by dreaming. I spent hours browsing ads, seeing apartments in places I only knew from movies. And then suddenly a photo of Monaco appeared. The intense blue sea, the elegant buildings, the soft glow of dusk. I felt something ignite in me, a recognition that had no logic but had truth. With each image of that place, I breathed deeper. It wasn't just a destination, it was a promise. The balconies facing the sea seemed to call me, like a silent embrace saying, "Here you will be seen." The narrow, charming streets evoked stories I had never lived, but would like to live. I closed my eyes and imagined my footsteps there. The Mediterranean wind touching my face, a quiet coffee at dawn, my name echoing in a different language. For the first time in a long time, my dream had a shape, an address, a color. It's possible. And closer than you think. 2 days later, Derek gave me the contact of a real estate agent in Monaco, Lucienne Dumas. I scheduled a video call with her, feeling my hands sweat on the keyboard. When her image appeared on the screen, it was as if the whole city was behind her. She spoke with a welcoming smile, explaining every detail of the property. Lucienne turned the camera and I saw the apartment. Light walls, huge windows, a balcony open to the sea. The sun came in at perfect angles, illuminating every corner as if it were made for new beginnings. I felt a lump in my throat, like someone looking at a photograph of the future. It was exactly what I didn't know I was looking for. She patiently described the rooms, showing closets, floors, night view. I saw myself there, walking barefoot, listening to music, preparing coffee unhurriedly. The computer screen seemed to open to a world where I was the protagonist again. Deep down, I knew it wasn't just an apartment. It was a symbol. A space where my story could begin again, without ghosts of others' decisions. Possession on February 1st, Madame Porter. I stayed silent for a few moments after Lucienne ended the presentation. My heart raced as if I had run a marathon. I accept, I heard my voice say before my mind could censor it. Derek, on the other end of the line, smiled, perhaps the first sincere smile I had seen that month. He began to list documents, deadlines, transfers. Everything sounded frightening but at the same time liberating. It was a risk, but my own risk. Every step he described was a key unlocking an old door within me. As I wrote down the instructions, I felt a shiver run down my arms. It was fear but also excitement. I was finally taking my dreams off paper. Peter would have been proud. I could almost hear his voice encouraging me. I closed my notebook and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I had something all my own, a plan, a future, a choice. Send me the documents today. In the afternoon, I called Sharon for tea in the garden. I told her about the apartment, about Lucienne, about Derek. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and joy. "I knew you would find a way," she said, squeezing my hands. Speaking the plan out loud made everything seem more real. Sharon offered immediate help. "I'll take care of the boxes, the visits, whatever you need." Her generosity made me cry. Not from sadness but from gratitude. I wasn't as alone as I thought. As the sun set, I looked at the house one last time. Every corner seemed like a farewell in progress. The walls that once imprisoned me now seemed just a temporary backdrop. It was strange, but it didn't hurt as much as I imagined. I knew that soon this life would be behind me. The weight was still there, but it was no longer insurmountable. There was a horizon before me. Soon you'll have to say goodbye to all of this. That afternoon I received the real estate agent in the backyard, away from Nathan and Rachel's curious eyes. She was discreet, professional, and understood immediately that everything needed to be done in silence. I showed her the rooms with the calm of someone saying goodbye unhurriedly, explaining details with a care given only to what one loves. The house reacted to the movement as if it sensed the change approaching. They started scheduling visits for times when I knew the two would be out. Each group that crossed that gate was a possible new chapter for that house. I observed the interested parties' gazes, their expressions in front of the kitchen where I prepared dinners, the bedroom where I raised my son. It was strange to see my history being evaluated by strangers. However, something inside me grew stronger. With every compliment I heard about the house's details, I felt that Peter was also being honored. It wasn't abandonment, it was transition. I was handing that home over to time, with the dignity it deserved. Until one morning I received a call from the agent, her voice firm, almost excited. "Ellie, we have an offer, and it's cash. We have an offer, and it's cash." Their names were Miriam and George Thompson, a middle-aged couple, kind with eyes that smiled more than words. When I met them, I knew there was something right there. They didn't ask about the emotional value of the house, but looked at it with silent respect, as if they knew they were entering a sanctuary. The proposal was fair. $465,000, no contingencies, closing in 2 weeks. The speed caught me by surprise but also brought me relief. It would be the exact time to finalize everything before January 31st. My heart beat like a drum between urgency and liberation. Derek reviewed the terms and confirmed it was an excellent proposal. Nothing stood in our way. We were one step away from the final turn, and everything seemed aligned. Still, doubt whispered, was it too soon? Was I ready? But looking out the window and seeing Sharon in the garden, I understood that yes, the time was now. The agent awaited my answer on the phone, and I, with steady hand, said, "I accept." "Do you accept or wait longer?" Signing the papers was simpler than I imagined. No tightness in my chest, no hesitation. It was like sealing a pact with the version of myself I had been rediscovering. With each signature, I felt more in control of my own story. Derek handled the details with his usual calm, and I trusted him. Then I sat at Peter's old desk. I took paper and pen and wrote with the same firmness he used to sign our Christmas cards. The words came like a river, long contained. I didn't justify, I just told. I spoke of the sale, the choice, the silence in which everything was done. In Nathan's letter, there was tenderness and sadness. In Rachel's, only respect and distance. It wasn't revenge, it was clarity. They needed to understand that I hadn't disappeared. I was erased, and now I chose to reappear. I didn't want to cause pain, but I also couldn't continue silencing mine. The letters were ready. Sealed. The future too. They won't understand, but they will know. The kitchen was arranged with an almost comical formality. Rachel served the dishes as if she were hosting a diplomatic event. Nathan helped, but his gaze avoided mine. The atmosphere was tense, but disguised by linen napkins and aligned glasses. It was more a pretense than a family meal. "We thought we'd talk calmly today," Rachel said, settling at the table. She spoke of senior living options as if they were resorts. She presented brochures, suggestions, deadlines, all very well planned. I watched everything in silence as if I were outside my body. The irony of the situation made me smile inwardly. They spoke as if deciding someone's fate without even asking if she wished to leave. But at that moment I had something they didn't expect. A secret. A plan already completed, sealed, irreversible. I waited for the right moment, served myself calmly, and said what needed to be said, with lightness and decision. "You don't need to worry anymore." Silence fell over the table like a heavy blanket. Nathan raised his eyebrows, Rachel tightened her lips. I continued eating as if speaking of something mundane. "I've already found a place. I'm moving," I added, looking directly at them both. The serenity in my voice contrasted with the whirlwind in their eyes. Rachel tried to smile, but her discomfort was evident. Moving, she repeated, as if the word were foreign to her. Nathan rested his elbows on the table, trying to understand. I watched them as if they were children watching a magic trick. I spoke little. I gave no details. I just made it clear that it was final, that I was happy with the decision. Every syllable of mine was a brick laid around my freedom. They didn't know, but that was the last meal we would share in that setting. It was strange to feel peace amidst their confusion, but that's exactly what it was, peace. You'll be surprised. At the end of dinner, I slowly got up and went to the living room. I picked up the letters and came back, handing one to each of them. They looked at the envelopes as if they were tickets to a game they didn't know. Read them after coffee, I asked with a calm smile. Rachel frowned, suspicious. Nathan held the letter with both hands, as if it had weight. Neither of them said a word. The atmosphere was now different. I controlled the time, the narrative, the farewell. They didn't know what the letters contained, but they knew nothing would be the same. I in turn felt lighter than I had in a long time. I had done everything I needed to. I spoke, I wrote, I chose. I walked to the kitchen door and looked one last time at the house that was no longer mine. Open them after coffee tomorrow morning. The next morning, already far from that table, I imagined the scene unfolding. Nathan waking up early, picking up his letter with trembling fingers. The silent kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee contrasting with the weight of the envelope. I could almost hear the paper tearing. In the letter, my firm handwriting explained everything. The sale of the house, the details they ignored, the decision to leave for Monaco. Each sentence was a brick removed from the wall they had built around me. It was my voice finally cutting through the distance. I visualized the moment he read. She sold the house and is moving to Monaco. The short but definitive phrase echoing in the air like an unexpected sentence. Nathan, my son, sitting at the table that was no longer ours. The surprise etched on his face. I, in another place, felt my heart pound. Not from guilt but from courage. For the first time I had done something just for myself. She did what? Rachel, beside Nathan, read her own letter with wide eyes. The short, direct lines dismantled the control she always thought she had. Without the house, without the plans to push me away, she was now adrift. It was like watching a chess piece fall by itself. I imagined her nervous voice breaking the silence. Now what? Where are we going to live? Nathan silent, hands in his hair, gaze lost. It was the first time they saw the power of choice in my hands, not theirs. And perhaps it was the first time they felt the fear I had carried for months. Rachel tried to reorganize her thoughts, but everything was out of order. The walls she thought were hers no longer existed. The ground beneath her feet was just dust. It was a moment I didn't wish for, but it was inevitable. On the other side, I thought of Sharon, of Monaco, of freedom. I didn't wish for revenge, but I knew life sometimes teaches painful lessons. She disappeared with everything. Meanwhile, I was sitting on the balcony of a simple but quiet hotel. The sea stretched before me, blue and calm, as if welcoming me. The wind touched my face delicately, bringing a smell of salt and promise. I breathed deeply, feeling that each breath was a piece of me returning. For the first time in months, there were no voices pushing me. No clock pressuring me. There was only me, my suitcase, and the constant sound of the waves. It was as if the world was giving me a break, a pause to rebuild my rhythm. Looking at the horizon, I remembered Peter. I spoke softly as if he could hear. I did it, my love. The tear that fell was not of sadness, but of liberation. My heart was light. In the distance, a seagull streaked across the sky like a white line on a blue canvas. I smiled, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun. The future was still unknown, but for the first time it didn't scare me. Only one day left. The house was empty but full of memories. Every step I took echoed like a whisper of everything I had lived there. The Thompsons arrived punctually, kind and respectful. George shook my hand firmly, Miriam smiled with tearful eyes. I handed over the keys like someone closing a chapter with dignity. They didn't ask many questions. They just thanked me and promised to take care of everything with affection. Those words touched me more than any farewell Nathan could have made. It wasn't just a house being handed over. It was my story being entrusted to new hands, new hearts. Sharon was at the gate, with red eyes and a brave smile. I ran to her and hugged her tightly, feeling in her arms all the support that kept me standing. "You saved me," I whispered, and she just shook her head, emotional. That friendship was my shelter when everything seemed to crumble. With one last look at the garden, I got into the waiting car. I left behind not just walls, but everything that once held me captive to them. Thank you for not letting me forget who I was. At the airport restaurant, I sat by the window. I ordered a simple dish, but savored every bite as if it were a rite of passage. There was something poetic about having my last meal there, alone and content. The world around continued its course, but inside me everything seemed to slow down. I closed my eyes for an instant and imagined Peter sitting across from me. I smiled tenderly, thinking about how he would have supported me, maybe even joked, "Took you long enough, Ellie." His presence was a sweet absence, no longer painful. He remained with me, not as a shadow but as a root. The waiter brought me the bill, and as I picked up my purse I felt a different weight, that of lightness. I owed nothing to anyone anymore. My existence was whole again. For the first time in years, no one was waiting for me with judgments or impositions. There, before that last cup of tea, I understood that fear had left before me. I'm not alone anymore. The boarding was silent. The sound of the loudspeakers seemed distant, as if they no longer belonged to me. As I boarded the plane, I clutched the ticket tightly, as if it were a passport to freedom. I sat by the window and took a deep breath, watching the runway stretch out. When the plane began to move, a mixture of nervousness and excitement ran through my body. The city lights receded, becoming just dots on a map I was leaving behind. Tears came effortlessly, warm, serene. Not from pain, from gratitude. The takeoff was smooth. My teary eyes saw the world shrink beneath the clouds, and within me, something expanded. I was no longer the invisible woman in the house. I was someone who chose, who went, who allowed herself to start over. When the fastened seatbelt's light went out, I smiled. Monaco, here I come. Across the ocean, as I settled into my new world, Nathan lived the reflection of everything he ignored. Rachel, after days of tension and silence, simply left. No scene, no warning, just a suitcase and a vague note about not being able to take the pressure anymore. The son who once decided my future now faced his own abandonment. Alone in that empty house, where promises of control once echoed, he wandered through cold rooms. The hallways, once filled with veiled contempt, became mirrors of regret. Every piece of furniture seemed to scream what he refused to hear from me. In that solitude he found the only truth that remained. He didn't know where I was. He tried to call me. He left short, indecisive messages, as if fearing the sound of my voice. There was guilt in every unspoken word and panic in the absence of answers. For the first time he wanted to hear from me, not to decide for me but to plead. But life does not bend to the time of those who arrive late. I don't know where she is. The phone vibrated as I organized my books on the new shelf. Nathan's name flashed on the screen, bringing an unexpected weight. I sat down slowly, looking at the name as one looks at an old mirror. I didn't answer. I still needed that silence for myself. Minutes later, the voicemail notification appeared. I took a deep breath, put on my headphones and pressed listen. His voice was different, lower, without the usual arrogance. "Mom, forgive me. I was wrong." That sentence pierced my skin like winter wind and summer heat all at once. He spoke little but with truth. For the first time, without demands, without justifications. It was just a naked plea, forgiveness. I closed my eyes and let the tears flow without resistance. They weren't from pain. They were from relief, from closure, from belated reconnection. The resentment still existed, but it no longer commanded my heart. "Mom, forgive me. I was wrong." Lucienne arrived smiling, with a small black box in her hands. Inside, the keys to my new apartment. "It's all yours now, Madam Porter," she said tenderly. I took them like someone receiving a trophy, not for beating others but for choosing myself. Walking through the lobby was different this time. I wasn't a visitor. Every detail, the paintings, the faint scent of the hall, the kind eyes of the doorman, seemed to welcome me. It was more than a property, it was home. A new beginning with a name and surname. I opened the door slowly. The sun streamed through the window, embracing every corner of the place. The balcony called me first, and there I stood, watching the sea and feeling that at last I had space to breathe. No longer as a tolerated shadow, but as my own light. And at that moment I understood. I was once again the owner of my story. Welcome to your new beginning, Madam Porter. That morning I received an unexpected message. It was a video sent by Miriam Thompson. With curiosity and lightness I opened the file. The old house appeared full of life. Painters, gardeners, new furniture arriving. It was strange to see everything so different, but it didn't hurt. They preserved the garden that Peter and I created. Miriam mentioned in her caption that corner would be kept as a tribute to the former resident. A gentle warmth ran through my chest. That house at last was cared for with love, even if by other hands. I watched the video 3 times. In every detail I saw what I never received from my own. Respect, continuity, care. George smiled as he showed the new library he planned to set up where my office used to be. It was a way of keeping alive an essence that many ignored. I turned off my phone, sighed, and thought with tenderness, they take better care of it than my own son. In the afternoon, I went for a walk through the streets of Monte Carlo. The sunset painted the buildings golden, and there was a faint perfume in the air, lavender perhaps, or freedom. My steps were slow, firm, with no rush to arrive. I no longer had imposed schedules or forced destinations. The narrow streets, the lively cafes, the voices and languages I barely understood. Everything seemed familiar. Not because I already knew it, but because I belonged to myself again. A group of ladies laughed in a square, and I felt like laughing with them, even without knowing why. The lightness of that city was not just in the climate, but in the eyes of the people. No one looked at me as if evaluating, as if measuring value by lifetime. Here I was just another woman walking. And that was everything. Freedom lived there. In the small things, in the kind gestures, in the silence that doesn't judge. Here, no one asks me to leave. Before returning home, I stopped at a flower shop. I chose a bouquet of white lilies, simple but vibrant. I walked with them in my arms, feeling as young as I hadn't felt in decades. Not young in age, but in presence, in new beginnings. Upon arriving, I placed the lilies in a vase and took them to the bathroom. There, before the mirror, I stared at myself for long seconds. The wrinkles were still there, the gray hairs too. But there was something new in my eyes, life. I touched my own face delicately. I was there, whole, conscious, free. Smiling with a bouquet in my hand and a world ahead. Thank you for not giving up on me, I murmured, as if speaking to all the versions that had survived until now. And for the first time I understood that the true beginning was not the journey. It was the choice. Choosing myself was the beginning, not the end. Dearest Sharon, today I woke up missing your laugh and our tea in the garden. I sat down to write as the Monaco sun streamed through the kitchen window. The mornings here have a sweet, almost silent taste, as if the world is whispering welcomes. I've been taking walks, learning the names of the streets, and discovering small hidden cafes that make me smile. The apartment already feels like me, or perhaps it's me who finally looks like a home. I set up my library in the living room, and each book feels like an old companion. At night, I like to watch the city lights reflecting on the sea, as if Peter is writing to me with stars. Life here doesn't scream, doesn't pressure. Just is. Derek said my investments are well managed and that I can make plans with freedom. And that's what I'm doing, plans. Simple, small, full of meaning. Sometimes just thinking about tomorrow is enough of a plan. But today, as I write to you, a new thought visited me and stayed. Perhaps it's time for another companion in this new phase. I've been thinking about adopting a dog. Today, walking along the promenade, I saw a scene that brought me back to the Ellie I once was. An older woman, younger than me, tried to keep up with her hurried daughter, who was on her phone without even noticing her mother's presence. The mother smiled with effort, trying to keep pace, unheard. I watched from a distance, my heart aching. It was like seeing my reflection in another time. The way she gestured, trying to participate, reminded me of myself in so many silenced breakfasts. No one deserves to feel invisible in their own story. She passed by me and our eyes met. I smiled, and she returned a tired but grateful smile. Perhaps my gaze told her, I understand. And in that brief instant between two unknown women, there was solidarity. I continued my walk, silently rooting for her. May she find courage too. I close this letter, Sharon, with a peaceful heart. You reminded me who I was when I almost forgot. And now, every day, I remember to live like someone who has returned from a long journey into herself. Here I blossomed, and I continue to blossom. If this letter ever reaches another woman, may she know, it's never too late. Time doesn't erase, it reveals. And sometimes to find ourselves again, we first need to step away from the noise, from others, and even from ourselves. It's not easy, but it's possible. And when we finally choose ourselves, the world reconfigures around us. Losses turn into roots and pains into seeds. All it takes is the courage to take the first step. So I write with the certainty that it's worth saying. Don't let them convince you that getting old means disappearing. With love, Ellie from Monaco. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced something similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the final screen that you'll also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.